It's a boy! Dig it!
Your birth was a curse on the whole of humanity.
Dig it!
You can't touch me like you! I locked the door on you!
But I found the key. We'll have a deep. Here we go with a 4-4 pro in a dome. A medium tempo, spotlight glow. Honest champion against stagnant negativity. Told ya, comic books was bad for ya. Who did he add to my bad year? Damn. Well, mathematics called something.
Jacob, I know your father!
I gotta do it to get to it. Faster than a bastard maniac. More powerful than a loco madman. This Super Ready.
Good evening. Welcome to this week's edition of the WayBack Movies Podcast, a show where we review the best and not so best of 80s and 90s cinema, because really, fuck the 2000s. My name is Steve, and with me on this crazy journey,
Justin.
Doctor. And we're back. Back on Elm Street, if you will.
For the month.
For the rest of the month, we're finishing up the franchise, or at least the ones that fall into the 80s and 90s. And, yeah.
Well, you wouldn't want to talk about that one anyways.
Well, one of them. There were two in the 2000s, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
There was a good one in the 2000s. So, believe me, if we ever break our rules and hit the 2000s, you better believe that's the first one I want to talk about.
We'd have to cover the other guy all the way through for that.
That's very true. So, yeah, but that being said, though, we are traveling to August 11th, 1989 for A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child. That's correct. There is no number 5. There is in all the promotional material, but not in the movie itself. So, its official title is Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child. No one's explained why. So, there you go. So, want to get back into it?
Let's go.
Cool. So, here we are. We're going to 1989. Whew, rough journey, at least this time anyway. So, like we said, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child, August 11th, 1989. And here we go. So, directed by Stephen Hopkins, story by John Skipp, Craig Spector, and Leslie Boehm. Not really. Screenplay by Leslie Boehm, I'll get to that in a minute. Produced by Robert Shea and Rupert Harvey. Production companies Huron Communication and Smart Egg Pictures. Distributed by New Line Cinema, of course. The cast: Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, Lisa Wilcox as Alice Johnson, Kelly Jo Minter as Yvonne Miller, Erica Anderson as Greta Gibson, Danny Hassel as Dan Jordan, Beatrice Bopel, I hope I said that right, as Amanda Kruger. Lost my way here. Whit Hertford as Jacob Johnson, Joe Seeley as Mark Gray, Nick Mealy as Dennis Johnson, and Pat Sturgis as Racine Gibson. So, that being said, let's get into the production of this clusterfuck that was a production. Executive producer Sarah Risher thought of the idea of Freddy having a kid from just having her own, thinking her kid must be the devil. Because, kids at a certain age, you want to kill them, She was checking his head for 6s, like you do, because,
The miracle of childbirth.
Pretty much, yes.
This is so great. I gave birth to the devil. That's what this is.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever spent enough time with a newborn. Yeah, pretty much. They're all evil. The thinking behind it was the fans of the original film are now having children, and this could scare the shit out of them. 84 to 89. Think about it. Late teens. Watching a movie.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. If they were like 13 or 14.
Well, you're supposed to be 18 watching these movies. Mm-hmm. Whether you were or not was a different story, but you are supposed to be.
How old were you?
Well, I actually no. The original Nightmare, I didn't watch that until, oddly enough, high school. So I was about 15, 16.
All right.
I mean, I saw Freddy's Dead when I was 10, so there's that.
I'm just saying you started watching these movies well before.
Oh, I certainly did, yes. Yeah. Most people don't do that. Most people aren't insane.
Well,
so, there's that. Stephen King and comic book writer Frank Miller were offered the job of writing and directing the movie. That would have been interesting. Frank Miller. Frank Miller writing this movie, it would have been darker than it was. I can guarantee you. And Freddy would just call himself the goddamn Dream Demon. You comic book fans know what I'm talking about. New Line put out a call to any writer in the new splatterpunk genre of horror, which was very popular in the late 80s. Splatterpunk, named was coined by David J. Show, who took a pass on this script, is a style of horror that kind of had no limits as far as gore, and would have majorly inventive ways of killing their victims. Clive Barker's Hellraiser is a very good example of it. Show's first attempt at writing a script was called A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 Freddy Rules.
Freddy Rules, man!
I mean, I would have expected originally, like, looking at it going, well, it must have been Freddy's Rules, but no, they showed an image of it, and no, it was Freddy Rules. So Freddy Rules.
Like, you thought it'd be like, well, I have some rules now, and
I mean, I would think so.
But it's
I have some rules, bitch.
It's more like, he rules.
I guess.
As I guess people have been saying at this point.
Freddy Rules! I mean, I know I've said it in the past. In which he introduced the idea of a dream reality called the Coma Pit, which is the only place Freddy was afraid of.
Also a sweet punk band name.
Right? Stealing that name for a band.
The Coma Pit, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Michael DeLuca, who is an executive at New Line, liked a novel called A Light at the End, written by John Skipp and Craig Spector. So he hired them to write a script. The script that they wrote is online. I found it at a website called NightmareOnElmStreetFilms.com. It's like the Nightmare on Elm Street companion. They have all this information, and they do have original scripts, and this is one of them. There's some fucked up things in this original script. There's nothing aside from the fact that there is a child involved. There is no connection to the one we got.
Okay.
This one had a thing where the Mark S character was actually a woman. And she was into, like, art and shit like that. And all of her sculptures would start coming to life and killing her. That was one of the things that they had in there.
That's how I thought Greta should have died.
Yeah, well, there is that. I'll get to the Greta character. Again, I don't think her name was Greta,
Did
but
you
it
blink?
was fucked up. No, we'll get to that. There was also something that will come to pass in the next film, a lot about Freddy's childhood. So we actually saw things in Freddy's childhood, which do come to play in the next one. And the tone of it was very much like, I don't want to be like my parents. That was sort of the whole thing, which I guess was their way of going into the whole child of it all.
Like a 13-year-old
Pretty
child.
much.
Like, I don't want to be my dad when I grow up.
Even though they were all supposed to be 18, so it was kind of odd. The weirdest thing about this script that I read was the Greta-like character. So she was not a model, she was an actress, and she had this very skeevy manager. They all knew about it and everything like that. She was also bulimic, which leads into her death, where he makes her overeat. But the weirdest thing about it, the weirdest part about the whole thing, was they did this fucking creepy ass skeevy fucking thing where he takes her to an audition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, here's your audition, get into a bathing suit and dance around and everything like that. And then it literally turns into, oh, these two producers are going to fuck you. And they do. And you think the whole time, well, clearly this must be a dream. It's not. It fucking happens. And then she's left there, and she says to them, like, hey, she says to the skeevy producer guy, like, there's no movie, was there? He goes, of course there is. Don't worry about it. Leaves a pile of coke for her. She sniffs some coke and then somehow falls asleep, which I'm like, I don't think you understand how cocaine works. And then that's when Freddy shows up and force feeds her a bunch of cookies and shit, and that's what kills her. What the serious fuck?
Were the people writing said scene on said coke?
If you see interviews with them on the original Nightmare on Elm Street box set DVD
It was
set,
the late 80s.
Yes, they must be, because they were still jittery, and these interviews were done in about 94, 95, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, so then she's raped, and then she cookies, and then she dies.
Yeah.
Woo!
That was fucked
I
up.
love cocaine!
So
Fuck? I'm glad that none of that was in the film.
So, going forward with that...
You know what? Maybe I'm okay with the fact that she's in, like, 4 scenes before she dies.
Yeah. I mean...
That was her character's arc.
In all fairness, in this movie, that character was about as deep as a frisbee, so I really don't think we needed much more of her.
No, especially all of that nonsense.
Yeah. So virtually nothing of the screenplay by John Skip and Craig Spector made it into the film.
Oh, shit.
According to Skip, only the phrase, "it's a boy" was retained. He's not lying.
See these little words right here? We're going to take them. You just keep the rest of that. Just
Pretty
hold
much.
on to that.
While only around half of Leslie Baum's screenplay was kept, William Wisher, who wrote Terminator and Terminator 2, and David J. Show, as mentioned earlier, did further rewrites, and the final screenplay was put together just a few days before shooting by Michael DeLuca and Stephen Hopkins. The ending was written and storyboarded during filming.
Movie by committee.
Really. The script was changing daily as the movie was being made. So the actors didn't even bother learning their lines, because they're like, fuck it, we're just going to get new pages in a minute, so who cares? Writers John Skip and Craig Spector had to fight to get credit for their work on the script. No shit, because you didn't do it. So somehow they got credit, and they're going to get paid for it for their life, yet they didn't do anything.
Well, you didn't keep the producer's scene, but it's the best scene in the movie!
Yeah, that was... Yeah. That was certainly not something I needed. How they did, I don't know. How they got credit, I don't know. Because
the fact that they actually ended up getting credit going, you know what? You wrote "It's a Boy," and that's like the tagline, so...
Leslie Boehm, who wrote the script, didn't even know about theirs until he was contacted by Skip and Spector's lawyers.
Because why would, you know...
The guy who wrote the script that they mostly used didn't even know about the original script, and yet somehow these assholes got credit. So I'm not quite thrilled about that.
Hollywood.
Yeah, it makes no sense. New Line released the original poster, the crystal ball with the baby carriage, before they even had a clear idea of what the script would be. Because Hollywood.
There's going to be a crystal ball in it, right? Absolutely not. Make the poster anyways.
Yeah, we know there's going to be a baby, though. We've established that. That's what we're going with. Writer Leslie Boehm's original pitch to New Line Cinema for Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was Freddy Has a Baby. He said, I went in with one of the executives was pregnant at the time, Sarah Richer, before her kid was a demon, and I said, picture Freddy clawing his way out of the womb. No one liked my idea. So when I got a call for Nightmare 5...
Get the hell out of here!
When I got the call for Nightmare 5, when they came to me, they said, remember when you wanted Freddy to have a baby? Well, we like that idea now.
Get the hell back in here!
What if Alice was the mom? So, yeah, that was pretty much the way they went with that. Fucking, I don't understand how this movie got made. So...
Say that about a lot of movies.
Yeah. Boehm's original idea had all the teens working on a stage play of the Greek tragedy Medea. Not the cinematic tragedy, the play. Yeah, I'm putting that out there. Hot take. What are you going to do
It's
about it?
not really that hot of a take.
No, I'm pretty sure most people don't like it. So it was them doing this dark play and then Nightmares. He scrapped that idea pretty quickly. So Stephen Hopkins got the job because he was a set designer originally. You can tell. And his presentation was
You've been on movies, right?
visual and gothic. So the producers really wanted this film to stand out from the others in the franchise. It does. And I'm
Some
not saying
good,
that in
some
a bad
bad.
way. Well, I'll get into my opinion of it later. He was also a comic book fan, and his storyboards impressed both Bob Shea and Robert Englund. So, when you can pretty much draw storyboards like a comic book, that tends to make people happy.
I guess as he wrote all that Night Prowler stuff or whatever?
No, they wrote it about him.
Okay.
I'll get to that in a second. He was given the job on February 14th, 1989. The film was released 6 months later.
Hollywood.
That's not how you know. That's not Hollywood. That's New Line Cinema making Nightmare on Elm Street movies. That is not how Hollywood works ever.
That's how some of Hollywood works.
Hopkins was given just 4 weeks. Yeah. Just 4 weeks to shoot and a further 4 weeks to edit the film. So 4 weeks of production.
Got a
or
month.
8 weeks of production in total.
You got 2 months. Make us a movie.
This meant that it had to be shot... that they had to shoot on one stage while the crew dressed the other, so they could shoot almost continually.
Like SNL.
Nah, pretty much. It was shot like a sitcom. Sometimes they had to quiet builders on one set so they could film scenes on another. And even I just wrote, this is not normal.
You can't tell union guys to stop working.
Yeah, that's the problem. It has nothing to do with this shit should already be done and not next door. Hopkins was stretched so thin that he left the actors to discover their own characters, as they put it, direct themselves.
Figure it out, guys. I got nothing.
It shows. In a lot of scenes, it shows. Kelly Jo Minter liked playing the role because she enjoyed the idea of not always agreeing and kind of being the voice of truth, or at least so she thought.
Mm-hmm.
She did that to a T. Joe Seeley wanted Mark to be a darker character